gives very poor quality of life to the patient, but they can also cause a lot of as well as surgical complications. For example, rib fracture, which is commonly seen in 5, 6, 7 rib, especially in females, and which is a painful complication. Pneumomediastinum or pneumothorax, there is a collection of air within mediastinal structures, or there is a collection of air within visceral pneumothorax becomes essentially a medical emergency. And depending upon the volume and condition, whether the patient should get a intercostal drain. Recurrence of hernia. So patients get operated for hernia, and they keep coming to the surgeon saying your surgery was horrible because I still get a lot of mass coming out when I'm coughing. So the problem is not with the surgeon or type of surgery. Problem is with the cough, because persistent cough has high intra-abdominal pressure, and that to herniate through the openings. Another complication, which is not a major clinical one but can be a hazardous, especially in diabetic patients, is conjunctival hemorrhages. So untreated hemorrhage may later on get converted into a retinal hemorrhage and can cause permanent vision loss in the patient. So it's not only a diagnostic difficulty, it also can cause a significant medical emergency and serious disorders. That's why evaluation of chronic cough is important. Key to success is to establish a diagnosis and treat the cause. We just can't give cough syrup to the patient for 6, 8 months, because patient then will keep changing the doctors and finally he will be unsatisfied. Uh, that's why evaluation of chronic cough after basic evaluation can be very challenging. Basic evaluation, which really gives us the diagnosis of either an infection, inflammation, or a malignancy, which are usually very straightforward diagnosis. Patient is a smoker, 70 year of age, comes with hemoptysis and chronic cough. You do an X-ray, you find out there is the last diagnosis, and the diagnosis is over. Or you do CT
Sir, may I interrupt for a while? आवाज थोड़ा ना असं ब्रेक होतोय सर. Voice is not coming clear.
Okay.
हाँ, थोडंसं असं.
आता क्लियर है?
हाँ, looks better. Yeah.
Okay. So after the basic evaluation, then with the differential diagnosis of infections, inflammation, and malignancy, it is very difficult and challenging to other and given appropriate treatment. There is no gold standard guideline to follow. So, for example, if the patient comes with stroke, there are established guidelines regarding stroke protocol. If the patient comes in acute chest pain, there are specific guidelines from all the sides how to deal with acute chest pain, but there is no guideline from any society, any society regarding chronic cough. So it's very important to protocol for evaluation. It might vary from one clinician to another, but at least it should cover basic testing and basic differential diagnosis so that we will be able to reach the diagnosis at the end of the evaluation. So these are the basic causes of chronic cough: upper airway cough syndrome, asthma, respiratory tract infection, ACE inhibitors, chronic bronchitis, bronchiectasis, cancer, non-asthmatic eosinophilic bronchitis, and some other rare causes which I will discuss later. So for quite common cause of irritating dry cough, we call it as upper airway cough syndrome. And so what is upper airway cough syndrome? So basically it's a post-nasal drip or a rhinosinusitis related cough. So post-nasal drip may or may not be associated with chronic allergic rhinitis, or it can be associated with kind of sinusitis. So allergies, recurrent viral infections can present with upper airway cough syndrome. If you are suspecting an atopy, there is definitely a family history of allergies in the family. There are obvious triggers in terms of dust mite, smell of paint, all those things can trigger allergic rhinitis, and then patient starts getting chronic cough. They also have a lot of seasonal variation because of fungal spores and pollens in those seasons. So in India, this August to December is for patients with allergy of particular season. These patients we usually have persistent nasal obstruction, persistent rhinorrhea, and these are the towards an allergic component of allergic cough syndrome. Its problem is these type of nasal symptoms are not always there in patients. So, so in patients with sensitivity, so peripheral eosinophilic, if required, patient has a history of persistent chronic signs. Endoscopy with a number the structure polyposis or if in the nasal cavity, we can come a trial of along with antihistaminics.
Sir, voice is interrupting in between.
काहीतरी खूपच आवाजाचा खूपच इश्यू होतोय सर, मध्येच एकदमच ब्रेक होतोय.
एकच मिनिट.
हां.
Yeah, just hello. Hello. Hello.
हाँ सर.
आता क्लियर आहे सर.
Yeah, okay, all right. Okay. Okay, so if the obvious ENT causes are ruled out, then we can comfortably put the patient on a trial of intranasal steroid as well as oral antihistaminics. Type of steroids doesn't matter. You can use mometasone, you can use budesonide, you can use fluticasone. So all these steroids are equally potent. And initially, depending upon symptoms, you can put a patient on BD dosing, and then gradually you can shift them to OD dosing for at least 3 months. So persistent chronic allergic rhinitis needs intranasal steroids of 3 months, and then you can stop it and then tell the patient to use it as and when required. Whenever patient gets cough or patient gets trigger, then you can use it and then stop it once the trigger is over. Regarding antihistaminics, patient is best because it operates the reflexivity much better than new generation. So once you are comfortable that you can put the patient steroids along with antihistaminics and for patient after 3 months, and then give them for these patients. Some of them with silent postnasal drip. So patients in terms of rhinoceros, but respond to upper airway specific therapy. So need to use first generation. But intranasal steroid can continue for some time. Let's come to the second most important difference diagnosis to evaluate chronic cough. GE laryngopharyngeal reflux. These are two different manifestations of the same disorder. So how will you establish the diagnosis? So there are two things. GERD can cause chronic cough, and chronic cough can induce GERD. So temporal association is important if you want to establish a causal relationship between GERD and chronic cough. So patient gets a GERD, then there is a gap, for example, 1 or 2 hours, and then patient starts coughing. Doesn't make sense. So shorter the gap between the reflux and the cough, then likely is the causativity that GERD is causing the cough. So in those case patients, it is very cumbersome and it's not very cost effective also to evaluate causes of GERD and treat the GERD accordingly. So it is better to give them initial trial of therapy, which can give you the diagnosis, and then plan an investigation later on if the patient is not responding to your conventional therapy. So proton inhibitors, as well as anti-reflux measures like sleeping time, uh, type of diet you eat, duration of diet and sleep time. This is very important in management of GERD. So if you combine both, you get effective. Or rather, many patients who complain of GERD don't respond to trial of PPI. Then what should we plan? The evaluation may first is usually.
एक्सक्यूज मी सर.
या
सर तुमचा आवाज आहे ना व्यवस्थित येत नाही आणि मधली अधली वाक्य आमच्यापर्यंत पोहोचतच नाहीयेत.
I can't help because this is the only room I can sit in. There is no other. I can manage this. Hello?
Okay, sir. We'll
Hello?
just sir, we will continue. I think the slides are quite explanatory. So we yes, sir. Yes, sir. Let us please.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So endoscopy is usually not very helpful as esophagitis is very common in chronic cough, but usually tells us an alternative diagnosis in terms of hiatus hernia, in terms of ulceration, and any mass region if we are suspecting a mass in stomach. So the next step is an esophageal pH monitoring, which is very, very expensive and usually not as helpful in evaluation of GERD patients, because there is a subtype of GERD which is associated without an acid. In those patients, actually the esophageal manometry helps, which is a esophageal impedance testing, which is more sensitive and more accurate, but not happen in every hospital. And usually an interventional gastroenterologist is required to plan esophageal impedance testing. So what it tells us is there is a change of a pressure at the time of regurgitation, which is triggering cough. So that's what we come to know with esophageal manometry. Problem with esophageal pH is if the patient has a gaseous GERD, then pH won't change. pH will change only when there is a esophageal pH monitoring can be a false negative test in patients with GERD presenting with cough. So once you establish that there is a GERD and it's causative for chronic cough, then and patient is not responding to PPI, then what you can do is you can again re-initiate anti-reflux measures in terms of type of food, etc., regular exercise, weight loss, all those things. And if that is also not helpful, you can discuss about the surgery. So most common surgery is Nissen fundoplication, where they will change the angle between the lower part of esophagus and the body of the stomach, which can be offered in selected patients. The problem of the fundoplication is patients have a lot of post-op problem in terms of post-op paralysis in low motility leading to constipation, of post-operative pain, and persistence of reflux. These are the three most common complications of Nissen fundoplication. That's why it is not very popular even in the Western countries, and the number of in even if you tell look like it may not be actually the patient is of the higher rate of complications. Not all GRD is acidic, hence not everyone will improve with PPI, even though certain solid liquids are still possible cause for reflux. So they require lifestyle modification in situations. Laryngopharyngeal reflux is the reflux of gastrointestinal into the laryngopharynx, which causes cough. So it is similar to GRD, but they usually don't have aerodigestive defect. So they present frequently with throating or swelling, because you must have seen lots coming with hoarse voice, persistent chronic cough, and they feel that something is stuck in the throat, or some kind of foreign body is stuck in the throat. These are the patients who will be in the category of laryngopharyngeal reflux. So evaluation needs a laryngoscopy where you see erythema, edema, and thickening of the posterior pharynx. Problem is these findings are not very specific. Even patients of chronic cough because of cough injury can lead to persistent edema of the posterior pharynx. And finally, the PPI is the treatment of choice. It actually doesn't matter, but patient won't have those active abdominal reflux. So still comes in a differential diagnosis of chronic cough. Let's come to third and important differential diagnosis is bronchitis. So some of the patients of bronchial asthma does not present with classical symptom of and these so these patients typically present with persistent chronic cough, and there is temporal correlation with seasonal variation. So they behave like an asthma, but the presentation is not very classical. They present form of cough. So the investigation is the same as we investigate other patients of bronchial asthma in terms of spirometry, which shows the reversibility after giving a salbutamol or a bronchodilator. Bronchoprovocation is the gold standard actually for coherent bronchial asthma. Where what we do is we initiate the process of bronchospasm in a most likely a methacillin. So what we do is we gradually increase the concentration of methacillin, and we keep getting the pulmonary function test. At the point where there is a 20% drop in the FEV, the concentration of methacillin, and if it is less than 8 patient for bronchoprovocation, meaning patient has a airway hyperresponsiveness. That means patient has a bronchial asthma. We can also check the in terms of FeNO nitric oxide evaluation, because they produce oxide, and you can oxide in the as well as check for pneumonia. So tell us it's a variable airway obstruction as well as eosinophilic inflammation. Both of are very classic for a bronchial asthma. So the treatment is empirical trial health corticoids. You have to consider very during asthma regarding dose in health corticoids. So type at least 800 to 1 milligram of storage in a day, and you should give a patient at least for 3 months. Bronchial asthma is very responsive to inhaled steroids in few weeks. So at least we should be giving inhaled steroids for at least 3 months. Having good technique of taking a inhaler, because if the patient is not taking the drug with adequate technique, even if you are with a good dose, so there is no point in giving the medicine. We also taking the doses the way you have taught him, told the patient to take the drugs. And there is you can also add the next group of drugs like long-acting broncho, formoterol or salmeterol, which are the long-acting bronchodilators, which help in managing these patients of coherent asthma. You can add a leukotriene receptor blocker like montelukast. So all these can be added gradually over time, and usually patients well to this treatment. There is another form of eosinophilic airway with chronic cough. We call it as a eosinophilic bronchitis. We call it as a atopic cough. So patient is very severe cough with asthma because inflammation doesn't have a so patient won't have function test. Patient will have a severe exhaled nitric oxide and patient will have a very high sputum eosinophilic count because there is a significant inflammation in the lung. The cause is and is similar, but the role of bronchodilators in eosinophilic bronchitis is not as there in the curve bronchial asthma. So what you can do is you can give 3 months of corticosteroid monotherapy, and you can add montelukast later on if the patient is partially responding to the inhalers. That's why it is little different than conventional diagnosis of bronchial asthma. Where patient will have kind of a bronchoconstriction bronchitis. There is no
Sushruth sir, mute.
Hello, sir.
Mute. Unmute.
yeah, okay.
Yes.
All right, so let's come to the differential drug-induced chronic cough. So the most likely agents to cause drug-induced chronic cough is, and in few cases, it's an angiotensin receptor blocker. So ACE inhibitors, on an average, in patients with 5 to 10%, can present with a chronic cough. And it is most commonly used antihypertensive, and the most common effect in these patients is chronic cough. Most important thing is temporal association. So the timing of starting of an angiotensin receptor inhibitor and starting of cough should match with each other. All ACE inhibitors can cause significant cough except perindopril, which has been extensively studied, and the incidence of cough in patients with perindopril is less than 3%. There are multiple theories regarding how ACE inhibitors can cause cough. The most accepted and the most liked theory is bradykinin related. So what happens is angiotensin conversion, the bradykinin gets used up in that process. So when there is an inhibitor of a angiotensin converting enzyme, the bradykinin accumulates, which causes bronchospasm, and it increases the cough sensitivity of the neurons. So that is how the ACE inhibitors can cause persistent dry cough. But in not in all studies this theory is has been validated. So in one study, what they found, even they used perintropil, patient with left at enlargement have more chance of getting chronic cough. So that shows that even congestive cardiac failure also plays an important role in increasing the cough sensitivity in those patients. So it's a multifactorial origin. So the treatment of ACE-induced cough depends on whether it is mild or moderate to severe. If it's mild, usually treatment 8 to 12 weeks, and it usually disappears once you keep using it. So cough spontaneously disappears in 2 to 8 months of therapy despite continued and unaltered administration of ACE inhibitor. Another option in moderate to severe patient is temporarily discontinue the drug and then reintroduce it after some time. That will give you the diagnosis as well. And usually the cough doesn't come up. It's like a rechallenging of a drug. So the cough remains stable even after you reintroduce the drug. That is the second option. The third option is addition of calcium channel blocker. So calcium channel blocker actually reduces the accumulation of bradykinin, as well as it calms down the sensory arm of the cough. So that's how the addition of calcium channel blocker in existing ACE regimen can reduce possibility of cough. Or the last option is switch to angiotensin receptor blocker. But problem is the effectivity of ACE and ARB is not equal, especially if you're using it for a coronary artery. So ACE inhibitor will have an additional anti-inflammatory and anti-atherosclerotic properties compared to the angiotensin receptor blocker, which only blocks the effect of angiotensin on myocardium. Okay, so this is the most interesting subgroup of patients of chronic cough. So you have done everything. You have treated the allergy. You have started patients on inhaled steroids. You have given patients adequate PPI. You have told them how to eat and how to sleep and everything. Still, patient comes with cough. So you see unexplained chronic cough. So the cough persists even after extensive evaluation and failed trial of treatment, mainly cough suppression, antihistaminics, inhaled steroids, and PPI. So there are multiple names for unexplained chronic cough, like cough hypersensitivity syndrome, sensory neuropathic cough, laryngeal sensory neuropathy, sensory hyperreactivity, and vagal neuropathy associated cough. So all these are different names given for unexplained chronic cough. Basically, etiology depends. There are variable theories. So there can be more number of receptors, cough receptors. There can be more nerve bundles supplying a single receptor, or the receptors are normal, nerves numbers are normal, but there is an abnormal conduction. So this is a kind of a sensory neuropathy, in short. These patients can be associated with abnormal vocal cord dysfunction, which tells us there might be a possibility of vagal nerve involvement. The third possibility is, hello, am I audible?
Yes,
Hello?
sir. Yes, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yes,
Very
sir.
good.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Continue, sir.
Yeah. So those therapeutic options for patients with UCC are quite limited, because it's a kind of sensory neuropathy. So it's very difficult to treat these kind of patients, because one, it is very difficult to establish diagnosis because it's a diagnostic test, and second, usually the patient wants to whatever treatment are there is very limited. So the most tried treatment is opiates, so like morphine sulfate, so tablets of morphine, or it used to come in syrup as well. So it used to work well because it acts as a central as well as peripheral cough suppressant, because it reduces the nerve conduction in those particular sensory arm of cough. But it is associated with a lot of sedation, and there is a lot of other side effects of morphine. We must all know about it. All right, because these patients can also have a vagal neuropathy. They can present with persistent voice change, and there can be a paroxysmal vocal cord motion ability. So, and at the time of inspiration, they will close their vocal cord. So the patient presents like a gasping, or a patient presents in a stridor, like this kind of noise patients will create, and they will start coughing continuously. So in those patients where there is a lot of voice related symptoms, a speech and language program can help the patient really well. So it can give them cough suppression, vocal hygiene manuals, and strategies that reduce vocal cord dysfunction has been shown very effective in reducing cough severity in those patients. As well as there is important role of cough physiotherapy that focuses on trigger avoidance as well as voluntary.
हॅलो सर, आवाज येत नाहीये तुमचा. हॅलो शुश्रू सर,
Yeah, we will
आवाज
wait.
येत नाहीये तुमचा.
Yeah, we will wait. We'll wait for a minute. Sir, network issue वाटतंय.
दादा तुमच्याकडे 650 जमा त्यांच्याकडनं घे 15 म्हणून मॅडम ते इकडे पाठवतो मला
I am only in the last few slides.
Yes, sir. Slide sharing परत करायला
I'm not
लागेल
able-
मला वाटतं.
Oh, but I'm not able to do that. I don't know.
ते
Something has gone.
बेसिकली मतलब कनेक्शन मुळे यू वर लेफ्ट आणि त्यामुळे ते परत व्हाईट कोड मधून स्नेहा आहात का व्हाईट कोड? स्नेहा मॅडम स्नेहा मॅडम तर प्रेझेंटेशन मला
Actually, मला co-host केलंच नाहीये.
नाही तेव्हा होतं आता वेन यू वर लेफ्ट त्यावेळेस ते
अच्छा.
ब्रेक झालं असं झालं.
परत कळलं का?
युअर कनेक्शन युअर कनेक्शन वॉज ब्रोकन. तर
ओके.
हा
तुम्हाला शेअर करू का? जस्ट गिव्ह मी
हा म्हणजे इफ यू कॅन ईमेल इट टू मी मे बी मी और
तुम्हाला शेअर
जीपीएस
करता येईल तिकडून.
हा दिस टेक्निकल थिंग्स थोडस जरा ट्रिकी होऊन झालंय आणि त्या बहुतेक मीटिंग कनेक्ट करून स्नेहा मॅडम
येस मॅम
सुश्रुत सरांना परत एकदा हा केलंय सर तुम्हाला केलेलं आहे एकदा.
हो, एकच मिनिट.
हा
नाही होते अजून.
नाही होत आहे.
सुशूर सर को होस्ट आहेत ऑलरेडी.
या नाही आता नव्हते आता आहेत. Sir, can you share the slide on email to me? I'll just.
Yeah. I'll do that. एकच मिनिटं.
And maybe side by side you can try once again.
Yeah.
Let me know once you have emailed, so I'll be able.
नाही मला नाहीच आहे ते करायला ते.
Because mm,
एकच मिनिट मी पाठवतोय.
oh,